Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. I hope you are having an amazing week. I hope your Wednesday is going great. I hope your seahorse tanks and reef tanks are doing awesome. And we have a special guest this week. Holly, of course, as always with me, but we also have Tia from Biophile Endeavors. And we're going to learn more about the companies that she is working for, is handling, and what she can offer us in the seahorse community and everything about her. So Tia, welcome. So glad to
Yes,
have you tonight.
it's nice to be here. I love meeting everybody, and I'm so glad you reached out. It's very fun. Seahorses are fairly new for us, so I'm very excited to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I did want to say a big, huge thank you to Andrea because she is the one that said, you got to get Tia as a guest on the channel. She really loves you and wanted us to talk to you. So first of all, tell us a little bit about you, like how you got into aquaculture, saltwater, anything like that. How did you get into it?
So I tell people it's funny because I'm 27 and I have this like laundry list of a resume, and it's like, how have you done all this? It's like easy. My dad jokes I came out the womb a marine biologist. Like, so was
Oh
if
no.
koi had better colors if you had algae in their tank versus not. So that's just I've been this way. So my dad was I live in Tennessee, so Eastern Tennessee. The world's largest clownfish hatchery is about 10 miles from where I was born. So my dad was hired as their electrician to put in security cameras and everything. And he saw that there was millions and millions of clownfish in this place. And he was like, "Hey, Tia should be hired here. You should really hire her. I know she's 14, but hear me out." And so they had an internship program with the local high school. And my dad got me into the internship. And they said, "Look, we really just want you to track how many babies are in this tank and what the type is." And I was like, "Okay, easy." So not only did I find out what kind of babies were in the tank, what the strains were, memorized the strain genetics, tracked them back to the parents, and then also told them which pairs were going to have better, more expensive strains versus other pairs and their numbers. And they were like, hired.
Wow. Right. We need you. We need you.
Yes. And so while I was in school, I was doing honors and AP, and then I would work for them on the weekends. So like literally, I would go to school, do band, do debate on the afternoons, and then on the weekends go to work. And so that's how by 18 I had experience with pelagic spawners and tangs. It's how we were talking
Mm.
about breeding gobies and blennies that weren't even on the market. I was giving ideas for increasing folate in the broodstock food, and I'm like 17 training people who are like 40. And so
Love
um,
it.
yes, so whenever I went to college, I went to the University of Alabama in Birmingham. I did the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, which is actually a brackish lab. I didn't know that. They're an estuarium. And so getting this very, very niche type of education where we did cover, the scuba diving and the invertebrates and the, ecology and everything, and also, anaerobic bacteria in a swamp. It was such a cool experience that I then got to apply and like have an edge on everything else. So whenever I'm reefing, I see it from like a totally different lens than most people. So I used to work there after I graduated college and I went through vet school. I was going through aquatic vet school and I got cancer my last semester.
Mm.
So COVID happened and I moved back home. I went back to work for them in their phyto lab. And that's where I learned a lot from Dennis Tagrin, who does DT's phytoplankton. I'm sure Seahorses, you guys have heard of that before.
Sure. Yep.
I learned from him a lot. And then I was doing the phyto lab there. And then I was like, look, I'm going to kind of go on my own, split ways from this company. And I was telling them, they're like, how did this company start? There's not a lot of information. There's not website. There's not Facebook page. I was like, well, that's because it started out of my house. I was kind of
Right.
doing this because my day job is not marine biology. And people would come in my house and be like, wow, this is a lab. What are
Yep.
you doing? Like, so, at that point, it kind of spiraled. I had a little pet project where I made Ready Reef, which I'll kind of talk about later.
Yep.
It got so popular that I took it to a show and I sold out. And then so I did another show and I sold out. And I was like, well, this interesting thing happened with Ready Reef where I was trying to test what trace elements my product put in the water. Because basically what Ready Reef is it is a powder that you mix 2 parts powder, 1 part water, and you can make live rock like sandcastle style. So it
Wow.
is
Whoa.
using the same, instead of
Yeah.
having like Portland cement or things that are really, really hard to cure and let out with homemade rock, it traditionally has been terrible because it makes all these harsh chemicals in your tank. what I use for an aggregate is actually fat. So the way that I describe to people how it makes rocks is have you ever like chewed a piece of beef jerky for so long it turned into a rock? Like
I know
that,
what you're saying. Yep.
yes, that is actually the same process as what I'm doing. And the chemical,
Wow.
that fat that turns it into a rock, is actually astaxanthin, which if you've ever used TDO pellets, if you've ever fed anything like that, it's a really, really cool acid, which sounds weird if you're not a nerd, but it is able to help a lot with nutrition because it helps materials pass through the cell.
And turns them red, supposedly. Yep.
It's
know
kind of,
that.
it's also what turns salmon red. So if you go to the grocery store and you see like the all natural salmon, it's kind of brown, and then you see like the farm raised salmon, it's super red. That's the one with astaxanthin in it. So this rock slowly leaches out trace elements because it functions like a cell. So it's a matrix of calcium carbonate, the same thing that shells are made out of, same thing as live rock is made out of, except as your tank loses iron, it osmotically leaches out that trace element. So I was like, how much does this happen? You know, let's make sure this product is safe. And in the trials, I set up 20 10-gallon tanks. And I put them all full of instant ocean. I put sponge filters that had been soaked in hydrogen peroxide, totally sterile, dry live rock from the local fish store. I wanted it to be totally sterile. And I put in, not to that point yet. I'm jumping ahead of myself.
Sorry, I know. Go ahead.
Whenever I'm running these tanks that are totally sterile, I got them from the local fish store. I live in Tennessee. I've got tanks that came straight off the thing from the factory. I ordered them all new. Sponge filters that were new and then soaked in hydrogen peroxide. I started having macroalgae pop up on my rock. I was like, what the heck? This is impossible.
Whoa.
And so the only thing that anybody could tell me, and I consulted 17 experts trying to figure out why this happened because it ruined my study.
Right.
But it happened because there was spores on the dry rock. And it came out of the dry rock because it had so many trace elements in it. So I had all these macros, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. It was algae, you know. I know what it is, but like, cool algae. And so I brought them in Ziploc bags. And I took them to a fish show, and I was like, yeah, it's apparently like red pom-pom. And he's like, you have a freezer bag full of red pom-pom? I was like, yeah, it came up on my study. And he was like, what?
And so you realized everybody wants macroalgae. Everybody wants it.
And I had like blue hypnea, and I had like a freezer bag full. And this guy was like, how much for this blue hypnea? And I was like, oh, like $12. I don't know. It's blue. And he was like, oh my, no. Okay, I'm going to pull this up on Etsy.
I was going to say, can I order all of everything you have if you're charging?
And then I was like, well, dang. So that guy who bought like 40 bags, $100, and he's like, no, he ripped you off. So that's how the macros started. And so a lot of it was coming up out of the Ready Reef experiment. I kind of grew that out. All of that has since been sold. What I have now is I did a bunch of research on it. I've algae base. I love algaebase.com. It's all of these algae nerds who were just very excited to see me. And they have helped so much, especially Dr. Yokum in Japan. She has shipped me several Indo-Pacific varieties that she was struggling with. And so we're both kind of tinkering with levels and keeping everything clean because like I was telling her before we started, whenever you have things like macroalgae, getting them truly clean is almost impossible if you're even 60 miles from the ocean. Because whenever you drive, you do get the ocean water on your vehicle. You can touch your vehicle handle, walk in, and your whole facility is contaminated. So rotifers are especially a problem for culturing copepods. So you almost have to be landlocked in order to do this level of aquaculture. So she obviously is in Japan. It's an island, and she lives pretty close to the beach. So she's not able to do a lot of the clean culturing that I am. And my whole goal with all of Mudlark, which is the dry goods side, is to make things stronger and more hardy for hobbyists so that whenever they do want to try things, they're not getting the experience of algae pulled fresh out of the Caribbean in most cases, plopped in a bag with ocean water and then shipped to your tank to deal with your aquarium lights, your aquarium parameters, your whatever's going on.
With Aptasia, with everything in it,
horrible epiphytes. I mean, it could have literally anything on it because the seagrass and the sargassum beds, where most of these algae are coming from, and tide pools, that is the kidney of the ocean, also known as the sewer. Like, it's disgusting over there. So getting everything clean is super important. So that's what a lot of the Mudlark and Biophile is taking these things that would be nearly impossible to do in all these coastal settings that typically get funding for marine biology and have these big facilities and are able to do these experiments and do it on a much smaller scale, which is my garage right now. Yeah.
So wait, so real quick, so Mudlark, or no, I'm sorry, Biophile Endeavors is the overall your
Lab.
company
Yeah.
lab, and then Mudlark is the lab. Ready, what is it called? Ready what?
So the dry goods is Ready Reef. So if it's not alive, if it's our tanks, if it's our live good products, if our live rock products, if it is dry, it's on Ready Reef. If it's alive, it's on Mudlark. And Biophile is like the overall company. So like our government contracts are with Biophile.
Gotcha.
All of those are DBA under Biophile. And it's also because we do a lot of other things too. Like I culture whiteworms, and I'm trying to get whiteworms available in the hobby. My butterflies, the reason that the reef safe is whiteworms. Like they're really awesome, but that is a bug. So like I couldn't put that under my macroalgae company. So it's the big one.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, I understand. Trying to categorize. I get it.
Yes.
And so you talked about how you know, with like we're gonna dive into different things that you do, but with macroalgae, because everybody here is interested in macroalgae. We love macroalgae. And you talked about how it's so hard to get it clean to sell.
Yes.
So why would people consider your macroalgae clean? What's your process about, cleaning it?
Yes. So my process, I'm not going to give away all of it because obviously, like,
of course.
But a lot of it is whenever I get it from somebody, like I was explaining before this all started, my friend in Japan that's helped me out a lot, Dr. Yokum, she shipped me 12 varieties of Indo-Pacific seaweed that were cultured in seaweed water that had been pumped in. Like whenever they do aquaculture, they do water changes with things in the ocean. So really it's like a land mariculture. So her stuff is all super contaminated. It's got, epiphytes everywhere. It was horrible. So whenever I got it in, it's half dead because it came from Japan. Even though we did overnight shipping, it took like 2 or 3 days. And so getting that in, and what I do is I get a Sam's Club tote, which is like maybe $20 for 2 of them. This is not high dollar operation. And I put it in a windowsill. And what that does is the windowsill blocks out UVB rays, but it gets the full spectrum from the sun. So that's allowing it to get a little bit more used to the aquarium setting. I don't use a pump. I want it to think it's washed into a tide pool, basically. I monitor the pH, and then I slowly raise the pH to 8.2 to 8.4. Anywhere in that swing, I allow, and I do add buffers and things like that to get it used to my parameters in its ocean water before I moved over into synthetic salt, which is a very big thing with macroalgae. A lot of people just plop it in their aquarium. They'll drip acclimate, which is not as slow as you would think.
Right.
And your macroalgae gets shocked. It expels all of its, photosynthetic cells and then dies. So getting it used to that, understanding a healthy algae, understanding when it's time to move to the next step, typically that takes about a week and a half. So after that, it then goes under the halides, and it goes in 50-50 synthetic salt and ocean water. During the course of the next week and a half to 2 weeks, that's whenever I'm doing the water changes, and I dose metronidazole and I dose fluconazole in there. And people go, well, fluconazole kills my chaeto. It's like, no, your fluconazole is too strong. You're dosing it too strong for algae. And fluconazole is an antifungal. So if your antifungal is killing your photosynthetic thing, does that what I'm telling you?
There's something. Right.
So I do use those two, and that usually does kill off a lot of the all the copepods and the other materials in there, the pathogenic bacteria. I do put a UV in there as well. So it has UV sterilization going on. That's going to kill a lot of that going in there. And the one that I have rated for my little Sam's Club totes, which maybe hold like 5 gallons, is rated for a 70-gallon tank. So I'm blasted with UV. Yeah. And then I start dosing phyto into there too. So I clean culture all of my own phyto. My phyto, what I do is I've been growing it for about 7 years, and I'll take a little flask and I'll put it into culture and I'll grow it out, and I'll take a little flask and I'll put it into culture and I make sure it stays clean. And so it has never been exposed to pathogens. It's all grown here in Tennessee. I make sure it's clean. So I start getting used to a little bit of phytodosing, and that's how it starts to get those nutrients because that's how I got it from the ocean. After that, it then goes into fully synthetic salt and QT in the garage. And so that's the last 2 weeks of the quarantine, and I do dose copper then. So then
Wow.
it's going to go ahead and have another layer of clean. And at that point, I'm watching for, the whole time, I'm watching for epiphytes. I'm looking for any sort of nasties in the microscope water. The UV sterilizer does 90% of my work for me. But yeah, so it's fairly intense, I feel like.
So side question real quick, because Cheryl's not here tonight. She's got stuff going on. But she'll have comments next week, I'm sure, because this would be fascinating to her. But we talk a lot of the time about quarantining macros, and we don't have the extensive process that you do. You're a company, we're just hobbyists. But the thing is, with Aptasia, you have to feed the tank in order for them to even come out. So how does that work in your process? How do you make sure?
I do dose copper. So copper is
would
kill a lot of the inverts.
That's right.
But also I have noticed that whenever I let it sit in a tank and let it get still, and I bump up that pH really fast, a lot of those hitchhikers die. And you'll see them straight up melt off of it. I mean, I'm tilting the little bucket to the side to just kind of see what's melting off. And it's like a little pile. Like, ooh.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of it too is in between, I forgot to mention, in between the time it goes in the garage, I frag it. So I physically am inspecting it and I'm looking at it under the microscope and I frag it and I glue it. Every single, I don't know why people say you can't glue macroalgae, because every single one of my frags, I glue onto a little frag plug and they all live. So
there's certain species I've had. I don't know the scientific name, but I've had rose. It's somebody had it. It's called rose. It won't stick to anything. I don't care what you glue. Man, I tried everything. I tried tucking it. I tried rolling it. I tried gluing it. Anyways, so how many macros have you lost due to your extensive process? Okay.
So many. And sometimes they're from aquacultured places. And I'm like, your aquacultured macros can't handle my QT.
Right.
Which is concerning. But a lot of that is whenever you have some of these aquaculture strains, there's a difference between R and I think it's S. There's two different types of generations. R, let me double check this and make sure I'm saying right. I don't
boy. She's getting scientific on us, y'all. But we love it. We love it.
Okay. So let me make sure. Oh my gosh. Hang on. I have to type in ecology because apparently Audie has some. Oh. One of them is where you're talking about, it's R versus K. So R is whenever you're talking about the maximum reproductive capacity. That's going to be algae. They just want to have babies, propagate everywhere. Whenever you have a high generation time like that, adaptation happens very, very, very quickly. So if they have 100 babies and one has a mutation that allows them to survive better, that one's going to jump a lot further than if you were something like an elephant that has one baby. You have to raise it up, you devote a lot of time and energy to it, and then you can have another baby. So it would take you how many generations of elephants to have that one change. So whenever you're aquaculturing algae, that generation time is so fast, there's no way to tell if that aquaculture strain would be anywhere near one you pulled out of the ocean if it's been aquacultured for 20 years. Right. And I feel like that may be the problem with Caulerpa. You hear about Caulerpa going sexual. Mm-hmm. I almost wonder how, aquaculture that strain is versus like one that has been newly introduced into the hobby. I mean, nobody will study that, but
Holly, this would dive into our conversations previously about seahorses. Exactly what she said, but apply it to seahorses. That's so interesting. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean that's really cool. So besides macroalgae, what else are you working with? What else are you doing? What else can we?
A lot. Grace Romano runs the reef farm, and she was the one who
Grace is awesome.
I was, after my experience in the last job, it did not end well, and I was very content to have a lab out of my house and do my experiments and tell no one. And so she has been very good at getting me out of that habit. But I'll call her and I'm like, yeah, you know those saltwater cichlids I did? She's like, you what? And I'm like, yeah, the Jack Dempseys that I put in saltwater. She's like, you broke nature? And I'm like, oh, that's not what I'm talking about right now. They had babies. And so I have so many side projects that are I'm writing papers on an intensive that I don't release them until they're done. Because if it fails, then I'll be embarrassed. So,
Right.
but as of right now, what I'm comfortable talking about is we do have a new facility. We have signed an agreement, if all goes well with financing and rates. We will be on a 1 acre facility, and we will have the macro farm. Right now, we have 39 varieties. We do have a number that I'm willing to say of 78 that are performing well enough that I feel like I could farm them. A
Wow.
lot of these have not been in the hobby. A lot of them are more industrial applications, because a lot of what we're wanting to get into is carbon sequestering, which there was a lady that called me, and Grace is in trouble for this. She called me and she's like, "Hey, I'm writing an article about macroalgae, and I really, kind of heard about what you're doing from Dr. Yoakum and from a couple of other people. And I wanted to ask you a couple questions." I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." I'm talking smack about algae. I'm saying like I'm being horrible. Like I'm being so
Right.
unprofessional. So I thought this was just like a journalist. And so
Right.
she's probably sending you a copy of the article before it's published, just so you're like okay with everything I say and it's all accurate and everything. I'll
Oh
be
no.
messaging you. And so I look her name up, and she works for National Geographic.
Yep.
And so she was going over carbon sequestering and like which strains people were talking about
Yep.
in Iceland for eating and carbon sequestering there. And I was
Yep.
talking about reef tanks and
Right.
and
Right.
I was like, oh my, I told this lady that grape callirpa was the McDonald's of algae. And I was like, I hope all that doesn't go to print. So a lot of that is going to be, the carbon sequestering, a lot of the bigger parts of that I want to do. Pod culturing, I do 6 strains of copepods at the moment that are all clean cultured. I'm 7 generations
Wow.
in. And so that'll be Tisbe, that'll be Apocalypse, that will be Parvo, that will be Hawaiian Gamarus. It will also be Tigriopus. I'm forgetting the other 2. But the way I grow them is very similar to a commercial fashion. But what I do is I feed them all clean phyto as well. So whenever we get into the nutrition, I'll kind of talk about why that's so important. But I'll be doing pods, I'll be doing phyto, I'll be doing the macroalgae, saltwater cichlids. I also have a dubia roach farm, which kind of came up as a side project and potentially a food line. I have been talking to a couple companies about whether or not they want to adopt me to make their food, or if I'm going to
Oh wow.
and then there's also a couple of people in China I'm talking about making hang-on refugiums for a ready reef line. And so if you already have a reef tank, they have hang-on refugiums where it's literally like a pump, a clear area, and then a pipe. And it's like you can't do anything with that. I want to have like chambers where you could do, a deep sand bed and seahorses and macros and mandarins and have pod hotels at the top with drip trays. So it would be a filter and a refugium and a pod hotel and all of this so that it properly functioned, instead of just like, here's you an extra tank you can slap on the side. I think
Right.
so.
Right.
There's
No.
several things in the works, but as far as Mudlark, the live feeds, that's 90% of what we'll be focusing on, as well as the extra varieties of macro, just growing them out. And we will be doing a greenhouse very similar to Grace. So Grace has really took me under her wings. So I really like that. Don't talk about dubia roaches. I see you.
Yeah, sorry I'm not saying hi. Andrea, we mentioned that you were the person that asked us to bring her on, so thank you so much. And Tia, thank you for coming again. But so Grace actually has been on the channel multiple times. She helped us with Women in Reefing, with the Seahorse events. And so it's really cool that you're working with her, or have associated with her. That she's a definite person that you should be under her wing, because she's amazing. And one thing you mentioned before we went live is that you don't ship, though, right? You will not.
I do not.
Okay.
And a lot of that is, and I put a lot more of this on our website, which hasn't been released yet. But whenever I first got into the hobby, I walked to the local fish store and I said, hey, I really want to do my own saltwater tank. I work at the clownfish hatchery. I understand the cycle. I just need to know kind of what equipment, like what kind of first fish, where do I go from here? I know I want clownfish, but what else? And they went, oh, buy this live rock covered in Aptasia. You're going to put it in your tank day 1, put your clownfish in. Get an emerald crab that's definitely going to eat all your corals later. And then you're going to get a blue damsel for your 12-gallon. And that's going to be your first tank. And so I had no idea what I was buying. I had no idea what problems are going to be in there. I wasn't able to weigh the pros and cons. It was just there. And I just buy it and arrive in my house. if you order online or if you go in your local fish store, hopefully you get somebody who knows what they're talking about, but sometimes you
Right.
don't. And so I really don't like that about the hobby. It used to be a lot of trading and meeting people, going to shows to learn about products, and now you can go on BRS and buy something that was released 2 weeks ago with no reviews, and you're going to slap it into your tank you sunk 10K in. And I
Yep.
don't like where the hobby has gone with that. And there's also obviously laws with macroalgae. For those that don't know, macroalgae cannot be flushed. It must be burned or thrown away dry in a Ziploc bag. You have to dispose of it properly, or it becomes very, very, very invasive. Some of them can even go into freshwater invasive. And so being able to stress that and have people sign the waiver and be like, I will dispose of this properly, not only covers my butt, because if I'm the only place that you can get this super specific algae and it shows up in the Great Lakes, guess who butt is on the line?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I do have someone who's talking about being my distributor. I told them straight up, I was like, you assume all legal responsibility for making sure that these people do all of this. And if you want to try to ship it, have fun. Some of these algae are so fragile, I only feel comfortable packaging it in water I know it will be safe to travel in, and then shipping it home with somebody who they can then drip acclimate, and it will work in their tank. The shipping process where it sits in the dark causes some pH issues. It also can cause some weird interactions with heavy metals, which I dose in my tanks for the algae. And so I don't want to ship. I feel like it's too risky. There's too much education there. It's just not something I'm interested in doing. If somebody wants to be a distributor, have at it. I'll charge you the same price.
I was going to say, we're all mad at you that you won't ship because we want the macros. So we're all mad at you now, but I understand. And actually, I was really impressed when I went to your Facebook page and saw the waiver. I
Yes.
was super impressed that you're being so careful and making sure people understand the rules and, what you're willing to do. I really was impressed.
I've gotten cussed out only 4 times, which I thought was going to be more, to be honest.
You got what?
I've gotten cussed out only 4 times, which is a lot less than I thought it would be, to be honest.
Well,
but it happens.
You know how that goes. So when you do sell to people you do sell to people locally, right?
So not only locally, I do shows. So one of the things that I really miss about the hobby, especially I grew up in it. My grandfather went to saltwater reptile shows all the time growing up. It was like a family affair. I remember we used to have games you would play with vendors. It was intense back in the 80s and 90s. And so I don't like the direction that some shows are heading. They seem almost like, a flea market more than they are like a community event. So I want to get more people out to these events and meet these vendors and understand what products they sell and put their name out there. Going to a show is expensive. And if you don't have people show up to that show,
right.
So that's why I really want to do shows only, is because I get to meet you. You get to see me face to face. I get to talk to you about what you're going to get, talk to you about the pros and cons and what kind of setup you have and make you sign the waiver. But it gets people into the hobby and meeting people like them, which I think has really gone away in the hobby, which I don't like. I do like Facebook groups like this where you guys actually meet everybody and you get to message and you really kind of get to know the person, as compared to kind of like the weird YouTube influencer thing where
no.
It's weird to me. Maybe I'm just, too millennial or something. But
No, you're not. You're not. And
not for me. But I really like that person-to-person contact, and it covers my butt, and I get to meet people for real. And I've met amazing people like Zach. Zach and Tim, we've become like BFF, so we message every day. Grace has taught me so much, and I met her through a Facebook group. And so I just honestly, the hassle of shipping and the movement of the hobby the way I want to, I'm only going to do shows, and I'll travel around the country as long as people want me and invite me, and I will be there, and I'll bring my seahorses and all that, and we'll all be happier for it.
I promise we're going to get to seahorses, folks. I promise.
Yes.
But I would say real quick, I totally get what you're saying. When I started going to the MACNA shows and I started hosting the Women in Reefing event and the Seahorse and Pipefish event, I met so many people. I mean, I would never have guessed how many people I would meet that would influence my life, influence, what I'm doing in the hobby. And so I totally get it. Can you tell us real quick about your experience at the Aquatic Expo?
Yes, it was amazing. So I did Aquaticon was the biggest show I had done.
Okay.
until the aquatic expo. And so I brought, I was like, I've got a banner, I've got a table, I've got my
Yeah.
little shelf, and I've got my
Hey.
pods. And I was like, I'm ready. And then I see all the other vendors. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not ready.
Nope.
And so
Nope.
I went and like redid my whole booth like 3 times. I'm like, okay, now I feel like I look like I belong. And so
I'm sure anybody who saw her at the Aquatic Expo, Andrea, I know you're out there. Tell her she did an amazing job. I know she did. But go on.
but it was really fun. And so like what I eventually we figured out the way to do the booth was if somebody looked fairly interested, we go, we've got seahorses, and like people be like, where? And I've got the dwarf. And I'd be like, they're right there. Look, they're in their little jar.
They're
And they're like,
tiny, but you can
yeah.
see
And this show did freshwater and salt and a little bit of reptiles. So people would go over and see the macros and be like, "Oh, are these plants?" And I'm like, "Kinda." And then I explained what macros were, and they're like, "How come I haven't heard of this?" I'm like, "Beats me, dog. I love them." So, but a lot of it is just getting the name out there, especially at
them.
shows. There's only 13 people, and I've contacted all of them that I really like what they're doing. They're doing macros right. They're not throwing it in the ocean and coming getting it later, completely illegal. But those are the people truly aquaculturing them, and that's it. And so whenever I'm talking about, I'm one of the biggest ones. I started a year ago. Like you really could be getting something you would enjoy. It does well. You don't have to worry about, tinkering with flow and lighting. This is good to go. You could put it in the bottom of your sump. You could put it in a refugium if you
Anywhere.
want, anywhere. Just make sure it doesn't take over where you put it, and we're going to match you up the right one. But yeah, it's awesome to let people know that there's a different style. And people were really weirded out that I had the picos. So I have little vases, and it has about 3 to 5 inches of mud, depending on how deep it is. It's got my layers, which is like a modified Wallstad method. I don't know if you've done freshwater or know what that is, but it's
I
basically an
don't,
all
but go ahead.
it's where you have like a planted tank. And so I
Okay.
sell complete planted tanks. And they're like, oh, well, I heard seahorses are hard. I'm like, well, yes, they are if you don't set it up right. So what I've done
Right.
is I've got this all cultured. It's got pods. All you have to do is get Fido. You add it in 3 times a week. And you can either do one really, really big feeding of pods because it has a culture in here, or you can feed it a little bit every day. I feed them a little bit every day, but I know life happens. And they're like, oh, it's that easy? And I'm like, yeah, whenever you buy it pre-made. Like, so and so having this, I mean, I read a book on this, and it was one of the old reef aquarium guides talking about a planted saltwater tank. And so I was like, y'all haven't seen this before? And they're like, no, we heard seahorses and mandarins were hard. I was like, well, yes, but a lot of it is just the nutrition of them because they are so fragile, keeping up with that water quality, keeping up with good high quality food, making sure you are watching them for all these weird diseases they can get if you got them imported. But whenever they're captive bred and they take a lot more variety of food and you have the macros with them, it makes your life a lot easier. So
Absolutely agree. Absolutely. I actually did a post earlier talking about the fact that my current seahorse tanks are really boring, really sterile because I'm trying to breed, right?
yes,
So I have captive bred, not dwarf, but the adult,
yeah,
or not adult, the
erectus,
erectus, bigger
Breakfast.
size seahorses. So they're boring. They're not pretty. I miss my macros because
yeah,
a planted tank is really cool and they
yeah.
do well in it. And I want to get into when can we expect captive bred dwarf seahorses that are eating frozen?
So
That's
I
what we
don't
want.
then. So there's a couple of things, not to get too deep in the weeds. Whenever you
Sorry.
freeze or you dehydrate, there's a couple of vitamins that are ruined. And when I mean ruined, I mean basically you destroy the point of them. One of them
Okay.
is vitamin A. Copepods and amphipods have a lot of vitamin A, which is really, really important, especially for pregnant seahorses. We're talking about vision, talking about growth, talking about immune function. So not having that vitamin A to your females is basically making. Have you ever had baby seahorses that they seem to have like floaty head and they like can't seem to catch food real good, and they're like, if you've ever seen that behavior, that's actually vitamin A deficiency. So
Huh.
you can feed your brood stock vitamin A, and that deficiency will go away with the next batch.
Well, first of
Um,
all, I want to interrupt you and say
yeah,
absolutely agree.
yeah,
That's what all the good breeders do is
yes,
they condition their seahorses. They fill them full of vitamins and
yeah,
vitamin A and everything good that they need. But that's interesting to me. I didn't know about vitamin A.
yeah.
But go on. Sorry.
And vitamin B complex, we're talking thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, oh my gosh, pantothenic acid. I always struggle with that one. Biotin is a really, really big one. Folate's another really, really big one. All of these are completely gone in anything frozen or dehydrated.
Right.
So if you are feeding frozen mysis, not only are you dosing a lot of phosphates because they are preserved with phosphates if you're buying something off the shelf. They don't have to disclose that to you, but I have tested every single one at my local fish store, and it's got a pretty big selection. And I'm talking big trusted names. And it has shown up with preservatives in it that either are phosphate based or worse, they're completely toxic to some invertebrates. So I do not like frozen mysis. I think it is much better to get something like, for example, Dinkins and Algae Barn. You can order Phyto and pods that are live, available, come to your door, stick them in your fridge, and that's going to be cheaper than frozen mysis in the long term because you don't have all these issues they cause.
So time out real quick.
Yeah.
I have to interrupt
Yes.
because I appreciate this. You're a marine biologist. You're telling me these
Yeah.
facts. But the thing is, we know that
Mhm.
the adult, like, and I want to make this clear for anyone watching.
Yeah.
She's dealing with dwarf seahorses. We're
Yes.
dealing with erectus and
Mhm.
larger. The larger seahorses won't eat pods
Yeah.
typically, right?
They won't because they're too small. So
Right.
another thing too you can do is amphipods. So like Hawaiian Gammarus is another one I culture. I did have some erectus. They're not breeding really, really well for me because I accidentally got all females and I was dumb
Oh
and didn't
shit.
check. So I was like, why aren't you guys breeding? And I was like looking for their pouches and I was like, pouch, pouch, pouch. Oh, well, that would be why. So I've got a female now, and a couple of them do have their pouches look like they've been fertilized. But amphipods are huge. And I'm talking like 1 to 2 millimeter huge. They're really, really hard to find cultured. Hawaiian Gammarus, I had to actually pay someone to rob their sump to start my culture. I use those. And mysis is absolutely an option. It just shouldn't be your only one because it does lead to vitamin deficiency over time.
Well,
So
I'm gonna put it.
Mhm.
I'm gonna interrupt again and put a request into you because you
Yes.
seem to figure shit out. And excuse my language, but the thing is, totally agree with everything you just said,
Mhm.
except for I've got these erectus seahorses that
Mhm.
won't breed. I
Mhm.
know it's probably nutrition or water quality because I'm lazy. But
Yeah.
bottom line is, they won't eat
Mhm.
copepods. I can't get cultured amphipods.
Yes.
I'm too lazy to culture them myself. So I
Mhm.
need someone to come up with some sort of additive.
Yes.
Even if I have to buy live mysids, if I want
Mhm.
them to breed, I we used to have Dan's feed. It's no
Mhm.
longer
Yeah, I
available.
know.
I need a feed, right? That's
Yes,
I
yes.
need a feed to give the food, to
Mhm.
give the seahorses what they need because I agree with everything you're
Yeah,
saying. And for the record, anybody new, you can keep
you
adult
can, you can,
erectus
yes.
seahorses with just frozen mysis. But if you want
Mhm.
them to breed, if you want them to really excel, then we've
Live
talked
feeds.
repeatedly about adding live
Yes.
feeds, live treats. But then as he has talked about,
Mhm.
then you're coming into, where did they come from? Are they
Yes.
aquacultured?
Yeah,
Are they contaminated? So I'll shut up and let you keep talking, but go ahead.
yeah.
I need a
And you do
feed.
have an option. So that was actually at the end whenever I went over all the
Sorry.
vitamins. There is a mix. I use Vitachem.
Okay.
Vitachem has all of the nutrients that you could use to enrich any frozen food. So like
Okay.
cyclopeas, you hear about cyclopeas all the time.
Yep.
I have analyzed cyclopeas over the course of the years. I don't know if it's their supply. I don't know if it's been watered down, but the protein in each batch and the vitamins vary. So whenever I get them, I add Vitachem, I add Celcon, which is expensive, but I use a couple drops, and I actually blend up scallops. And I'll take the juice from that, and whenever I refreeze them, that then enriches them. So you can enrich frozen foods. Just don't feed it straight off the shelf. That's personally what I do. You don't have to be insane. You can totally, if that's what you've got available. I live in, middle of nowhere, Tennessee. Use what you've got. Keep your animals alive, obviously.
Sure.
But yes, vitamin C is another really, really big one too. And copepods contain a whole lot. It is an antioxidant as well. So if you do have some sort of illness in your seahorse, I always suggest using vitamin C, even if you have to go to the health store and buy the powdered kind because it
Hmm.
has such an impact. Vitamin D is another one as well for bone health and a lot of physiological processes. One of them is, in my experience, a lot of the endocrine stuff. So getting them mature and ready to lay eggs and carry eggs faster, you can have that more readily available by providing vitamin D. Vitamin E
Guess
as
what I'm
well.
gonna do? I'm gonna get him some vitamin D,
Vitamin D.
guys. Go on.
And just like humans, one of the things that the hobby has really got away from, and especially when you talk about seahorses, a lot of the seahorse guides, one of them that I was looking up when I first started out, they were like, oh, this is the Bible. You have to follow this one. It's this website. It was from 2004.
Yep.
And in it, whenever it's talking about culturing your Fido, they're talking about using halides and fluorescent bulbs. And whenever we use LEDs, yes, the PAR exact same. Sometimes the PAR is even better on LEDs. But what they're missing is UV and IR.
Yep.
If we're talking about vitamin D and its absorption, and you're running an LED on your Fido, on your copepods, on your seahorses, that metabolic process isn't activated, especially with Artemia. Artemia, people are like, oh, I love Artemia. It's so easy to culture. If you take your eggs and you grow them up and you keep your Artemia and you just feed them watered down Fido, which I don't know why people don't feed concentrated Fido, but every person I've met culturing Artemia waters down their Fido in the big container. And then you allow them to lay eggs and all they've been exposed to is LED. Over the course of 3 generations, I've done this 8 times, it's enough protein analysis, they will not contain vitamin D.
Okay, you know what? Here's the thing. I have to get you back on a Wine Wednesday with Dan and with Cheryl because the thing is, I have argued about the possibility of these things before, and so I'm very interested in everything you're saying for sure. Holly, you look like you had something to say. No?
No.
Okay, Holly's like, I'm just so.
You're for the ride.
Okay, go on. I'm sorry. I feel like I interrupted you. Go ahead.
You're fine. A lot of people decapsulate their Artemia as well. So you go through the decapsulation process, and then whenever they're actually, the nopuli are coming out of the egg, a lot of people know you have to have light, but they don't know why. Whenever you have that light, they actually make a glucose that makes them so nutritious. That's why when people talk about freshly hatched nopuli, that process of coming out of the egg with the light is what you're trying to get, that nutrition in there. Because otherwise, it's just, a Ziploc bag with nothing in it. You want that nutrition that it had to get out. Well, if you're not using vitamin D, that process does not happen as quickly or as effectively. So your freshly hatched nopuli, whenever you have it with a fluorescent or a T5 or a halide, whenever they're coming out, it's not the same as somebody using an LED freshly hatched nopuli on this side. So people could be doing the exact same processes, but using a different bulb and get different results.
Well, see, and for the record, guys, what we've done in the past, we didn't know what she's explaining now. I have always thought it, so I'll take credit for that. But I would say we didn't know it, but we always had the enrichment. So we've always said, don't use freshly hatched nopuli. Enrich, peroxide, peroxide, then enrich, then feed. That's how to do it because we're adding back in what we know is missing, but you're saying we don't have to if we use the light.
Oh, no, you have to.
As
definitely
much.
Enrich. Definitely enrich. But you'll have even more natural enrichment.
Even more. Gotcha.
And this is what, we had a talk at Aquatic Expo. We all went to a restaurant, and we were drinking, and I do this thing where I just start whining, and no one knows what I'm talking about. And so
we do.
And so I was like, all these people are feeding this one type of iron. This iron isn't bioavailable. So you can have iron in a bottle, and you can have iron from a rock that's leached out. And yes, they're both iron, but your cells will like the one from the rock more because it's arranged in a way your cells like. And that's
they can't take it up. Things can't take it up unless they can take it up. I mean, you're the scientist, I'm not, but I get what you're saying. It only works if it works, right? Exactly. And did I interrupt you again? Were you still
going? You were fine. I just know until you tell me to stop, man. That's just
no. And I am still here, guys. I'm just dealing with home stuff too. So with the pods and things that you're culturing, what is your how is your containment process for them?
So once I have, for example, my Fido strains, I do single strains because I am anal and OCD enough to do it. I do not recommend it for anyone who likes their sanity.
I was going to say, I'm not
Yeah,
doing
it's
it. I need to
Don't-
buy it.
Don't do single strains. You always want to get a mix. What I always recommend doing, I'm reading, sorry. Somebody had a comment here.
Mm-hmm.
UVB and UVC is not included with most LED lighting. You have to have a very special light, or you can go and get an incandescent bulb that is 7 volts, and it will give you the same process for vitamin D that a like $60 or $70 LED would. T5s, maybe I'm just old. I love T5s. They're cheap. You can put them in a Sam's Club ballast and slap them on big bags, and they grow nice, juicy phyto. But I also love Kessel, but for different applications. When I'm talking about growing things to eat, I mean under a halide or a T5 because of that IR and UV spectrum. But for my reef tank in here, I've got 2 Kessels on the top. For some of my macros, I don't want them to be in a halide because if I ship them to somebody and they put it under LEDs, they're going to melt. So I get them acclimated to traditional LED spectrum for that reason. But we were talking about my phyto.
Yes.
When I do my phyto, all of it has been single strained, and that's because when I go in my garage, I wear a specific clean t-shirt, and I soak my body in hydrogen peroxide, and then I soak my body in rubbing alcohol just to make sure I'm clean. Then we were talking about before the live, macroalgae are in a 20-gallon tank with a plastic bag wrapped around them into a frame that I've built. So whenever I slide them out, I have make sure I've sprayed myself and there is no contaminants. Then whenever I put it back, I go back to the clean corner and spray myself again. Unless you want to live your life like that, don't single strain culture.
But that's why we need people like you to sell this stuff, so that we don't have to do it. Go on, sorry.
So whenever you're doing your own phyto, there's a couple of strains that I really, really like. Isochrysis is one that I love. I also really like a couple of species of diatoms that are pelagic. When I say diatoms, people think slime on the sandbed. There are thousands of species of diatoms. The ones that I culture for my phyto blend are pelagic, which means they sit in the water column. They're not going to grow in your fish tank. They're not going to do anything but get eaten by your corals and macros. I also like Rhodomonas. It's a red phytoplankton, which is beautiful ruby colored, and it contains a lot of these vitamins I'm talking about. Nannochloropsis, everybody knows that one when we talk phyto. That's one of the big ones. Those are the main ones that I like to use. And it's because they are so nutritionally packed. So whenever I do my phyto dosing, I have these $5 Five Below lemonade jugs, and I will take it from the big culture out of that and I'll drip it in. Of course, I've sprayed everything with rubbing alcohol, so it's all sanitized. I'll drip it into the 5-gallon Five Below jugs, and I'll put them in the fridge. And that is my for use. And they have little spigots on them. So I'll just do like a suicide, like go down the line. And so I'll do a little mix of them, and that's what I dose in every day. So those have never seen the ocean. I mean, we're several generations in on my single strains. But I really like a couple of companies out there. Algae Barn was one I was talking about. I like ordering them because they always show up. Same with Dinkins. I love Dinkins customer service. I have been insanely impressed by their phyto quality. I saw them at the Aquatic Expo, and I'd ordered from them before, but they didn't know it because I ordered from somebody else. And I did an analysis on it for the actual counts of the phyto, and it is almost as concentrated as mine when I put it through a concentrator. So I don't know what they're doing to make it so concentrated, but dang, is it good.
We really love Dinkins. We love Dinkins.
Dinkins is great. You don't have to grow your own phyto. And when I did my protein analysis, I got very similar culture results. Mine has been meticulously, insanely cultured, and theirs was very similar. And so I was like, why am I even doing this?
Right.
But I do like my single strains. Theirs is a mix, but you can culture that super easy. Juilliard's F2 is what I buy from 5-gallon buckets, the Fritz version. And then I do beef it up with a couple of chemicals that I order from China and I test for purity. So I have a beefed up Juilliard's. And then I also, this is a hot and spicy take, and I don't want people to do this at home, but I've talked to Zach about it. I make a fish soup. And what I do is I take some of my favorite frozen food and I put it in a little bit of clean salt water and I set it in a window. I let it rot. So I have a very specific process of how I do that to get the bacteria that I want. And then I put that in there. Also, a big thing when we're talking about water quality and ingredients and what does it take to do all this, I have an industrial 12-stage RODI, UV, all water softener, the works on my house. So
Gotcha.
our main line has water softener. And then for the farm, it goes through another additional 4 or 5 steps. So
Wow.
my water is insanely clean. They know when they come out here that I'm going to have them test the mass spec, what is in my water. And if there's even a trace of silicates, I'll lose my mind. So my water softener people are very nice to me. But that's also a good start too. And so I told the story in another group, but I do a lot of like problem solving with reef tanks because as I've been
Sure.
around, people like email me random problems they have. And so there was one guy and he's like, I'm doing everything right. Everything on my parameters is wrong, but my corals are melting the second I put it in my tank. I'm like, okay, show me your ICP and let's go from there. His ICP was perfect. And I've never seen a perfect ICP. I was like,
No, yeah, me
that's
either.
weird. And so I was like, okay, can you send me like pictures of it? Like, let me see what's going on. And these corals were like imploding from the inside out. I had never seen it.
Hmm.
And so I was like, this is really strange. I can say that I have genuinely never seen anything like this. And I don't know. Like, so like, obviously it's going to destroy me because I don't know something. So it
Right.
really keep you up at night. And so, he was talking about his neighbor and he was like, yeah, I'm trying to dig a pool. They're messing up my well. Everything's going crazy with everything. I said, your well? Why would that matter?
Mm.
What's going on here? He's like, oh, I use well water. And I was like,
Yep.
oh. So here in Tennessee, I don't know if people know this because it's like a super weird fact, but Tennessee is actually an ancient ocean. So all of our water that we pump up out of wells is almost like a freshwater ocean. So it's really, really hard. It's got a lot of these trace elements in it. And so people around here with very low effort can keep some very crazy SPS because it is all of this soup that does so well. It used to be an ocean. So they can buy Instant Ocean at the pet store and replicate things that are people who are having to dose kalkwasser in other places can do.
Right.
And so I was
Like
like,
me.
yeah. And so I was like, when's the last time you had your well inspected, dog? Your corals are imploding. And he was like, oh man, let me get somebody out here. And his neighbor, he blames it on his neighbor. I think it's more of, all of the pollution. It had pesticide in it and it had
Mm.
horrible chemicals in it and it was making his corals die.
Yep.
So the water that you're using, especially when we're talking about these very sensitive animals, you've got to look at that, especially with phytoculture and everything else. If you're worried about vitamin A and iron in your thing, you got to make sure you're not dosing in poison. So RODI, big fan of RODI, starting clean.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say I'm so happy that we have people like you that educate everyone about this and people like Dinkins selling the Fido because I have terrible water and I just don't want to do it,
hard.
right? It's too much work. You talk about
It's
single
what?
strains and oh no. I'm good. I'll buy it. Just sell it to me. We need to get you shipping. But anyways, so I'm just trying to jump ahead. Sorry guys, I'm exhausted. Just I know I look exhausted, but it's because I'm doing this thing at work, real life. Apologies. But tell us about your captive bred seahorses.
So they actually kind of started on an accident. I have
Okay.
a big 250-ish tank and I had this refugium because obviously I've got some of the macros and
Yep.
it sounds crazy, but like anybody who breeds knows you like pick out your little favorites, even though they're not like super rare ones. You're like, oh, this is growing so pretty. Let me just.
Yep.
And so I had a refugium in the bottom and I was like, man, I want something kind of cool to go down here. And so I ordered, I think it was originally 12 captive bred seahorses. And I put a little screen over the top of my little in-sump refugium. And so that would go over this and then through my little refugium with my seahorses and then through a baffle and then back up in my regular tank. And so I noticed in my regular tank, I was doing a water change. I'm like, man, this copepod looks really funny. And I, got it in my little container. And I was like, oh my God, that's a baby seahorse. And so And so I took them out, and so I put them in their little container, and I scooped out all the little baby seahorses I could see. Those died. I was not prepared for baby seahorses. And so I was like, well, let's get you guys, some breeding cultures here. So I got a little mechanic shelf, and I put in 3, 3, 3, and 3, and then I ordered 2 wild caught for each tank. So at that point, I had a little group going, And very quickly, I realized how quickly they had babies. And I was dosing pods, and I was dosing copepods, and it was just in a grow out for the macro. So they're getting, the iron, the iodine,
Yep.
all of these things I'm dosing the macros, and they're getting to eat these pods just for free. And so I had so many babies. It's like, well, I guess I was a seahorse breeder now. This is
Surprise.
yeah.
And you're
so
talking
now I'm
dwarf
kind of
seahorses, though, right?
Dwarfs, only Zostray
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
I did order some Erectus, but like I don't know if I said it while we were live or not. They were all male. But yeah, so that's been fixed. Hopefully they'll give some babies. I've got a couple males that kind of look like their pouch might have something in it. So I'm watching them. They've been separated in their little brooders, and I'll be keeping an eye out. But they actually do eat freshwater scuds. I know somebody was talking about fresh or salt. So hard to get a hold of. I hoard those. I was like, sorry guys. I'll put some in and they can breed, but like that's all you're getting. And I dose the freshwater scuds. But yeah, those are actually from Cherokee Lake. They've been cultured for about 4 generations now. I feed those the turf algae from my algae scrubber. And I also feed them TDO pellets. And they love it. So my little freshwater scuds chilling out in there. And I'll scoop them out and then throw them in the Zostray, and they eat that. Or not the Zostray, the Erectus, and they eat that. And also the white worms. They really love white worms.
That's
tried baby dubias. They ain't about it. They're not about it.
Holly, are you like, what the hell? Because we can't
Yeah.
get our seahorses to eat anything else. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean-
no, my seahorses don't like live food.
Really? That's really strange. Do they do the weird head thing? Do they do the little? Are they able to see the motion? Have you?
Yeah,
watched-
no, they'll notice them.
Oh,
They'll even snack them now and then, but they don't really care for them. They'll go to the dish and say, "Mom, where's the real food?"
Well,
Maybe
yeah,
that's-
I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention that Holly's seahorses are spoiled. I mean, they are her baby, so that's probably part of it. But no, that's just interesting because I've kept different species. Never Zostray, for the record. So that's very different. What you're describing is interesting, and I totally think you're slam dunking it. But I've had issues where I couldn't get whatever feed I needed, whether it be live or frozen.
Yeah.
And my seahorses have always been picky. They won't eat like certain things, krill, anything like that. Nope. They won't touch it.
Now, I have seen, interestingly enough, when my seahorses were young and I had some other fish in the tank, I was trying to feed table shrimp to the other fish, and the seahorses sampled that.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this already. I pipette train mine. So they only get extra food. They got their food in their house that's like whatever's breeding in there. And I only feed them with a pipette. So maybe, I don't know.
Well,
so
that's
they
how I
only get what you give them. Okay.
Yeah, they only get, well, they come up, as soon as that pipette hits the water, they're like, hey.
Oh, I know.
And
No,
so
mine
I
are like, they
have
know
fed
the
some
turkey
LRS.
baster.
So,
If it comes out of a turkey baster, they know the turkey baster.
Yeah.
And that's how I've gotten them to eat live food sometimes too, is I'll put the live food in the turkey baster, and then they
Maybe
know,
that's
okay,
why.
that is
I don't know.
food. But then they'll have it, and then they're like, we like the frozen food better. I don't know.
Well, maybe it's just easier, but I would
What
say,
they're used to, maybe.
yeah,
Because they're years old now. Maybe when they were
young.
young. Or the ones
I would say too, though, the turkey
I raised from fry, and of course they ate live food as fry, but then I transitioned them onto frozen, and it just seems once they're on the frozen, they don't.
I don't know if that's true for everyone though, because all of my seahorses will eat live. They love live mysids. I mean, they will attack them like, oh my gosh, yay. But I have had different species not eat Artemia.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but they just aren't interested. It doesn't look like food to them for whatever reason. It could be the breeding process. All my seahorses are captive bred, so who knows? But I just think this conversation has been very interesting, talking about how we need to enrich or provide vitamin D or vitamin B or
Yeah.
whatever to
Yeah.
the feeds. Because I agree with you that frozen probably isn't. Again, anybody new to seahorses, you can keep
You do the
Erectus
frozen,
with
yes.
just frozen food.
Yes.
You can
Mhm.
do it. But if you want them to breed or you want them to, do the extras, whatever you're trying to do, then everything she's describing is absolutely good advice. And I don't know. I can say though that with the turkey baster, you guys, I use it to not only maybe put food in, but also
Yeah.
remove food.
I do that too.
Yeah.
When I'm removing food, my seahorses attack it. They're like,
They're
"Oh,
like,
there's got to be
"Hey,
food
get
in
away."
there. I
Yeah.
want it." So,
And
Yeah.
to think, now I have one tank of seahorses that really went for the mysids,
mhm.
actually, the live mysids. And the other ones were interested in them. They followed them around, but they were curious about them, but they didn't really want to eat them, other than Candy did, the female. My oldest female, she went to town on him, but the boys especially were more like, what's that? They were
Mm.
kind of curious about it, but what are you? And it's funny, in the other tank, they all hunted them down and ate them pretty quickly. So different tanks had different reactions. So I don't know.
I don't
Just
know.
individuals, I
Maybe
guess.
I've just been really lucky. Like, that's totally like, and also too, I really am glad that all of these enrichment and these pre-prepared materials are available. Like, I remember when I was
Sure.
doing this, I couldn't find Fido, like, much less the
Yeah.
food, much less Celcon and Vitachem. There was even one point I needed Celcon for HLLE. Like, one of my tangs back in the day
Mhm.
had HLLE. I had to have a vet get it for me. So I'm really glad
Um,
that all of these enrichments for frozen
you can
foods are
actually
out
get
there
them.
now. Because
Well,
I know I was
and
in
you
the middle of
say,
nowhere. So
sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
interrupt,
you're
but
fine.
you say these enrichments for frozen foods,
Mhm.
and uh Coro Works, sorry, asked,
Mhm.
"Is this where the higher quality, larger spectrum LEDs get some of their benefit?" And oh no, sorry, I'm
That was
asking a question
earlier.
that wasn't about my question.
Mhm.
My question was, part of the reason that we shy away from enrichments on frozen foods,
Mhm.
like we always talk about enrichment for live feeds, feed it to the feed it to the seahorses, your game.
Yeah.
But with the frozen feeds,
Mhm.
there's been research where a lot of it comes off the second it hits the water.
Mhm.
Even if you rinse the food, add the additive, you
Yep.
put it in the water, it's coming off.
Yep.
Does it still benefit them even if it's just in the water?
And maybe that's just a difference in feeding style too, because I do use the pipette. So whenever my
Right.
seahorses are bopping at the thing, I can see little swirlies of my vitamins that they're consuming. So
Because
maybe
it's
it's
going
just
right in them.
effectiveness. I'm not sure, but I do know that whenever you are feeding frozen, what I like to do is add all of that. Like, sometimes I've even put in little TDO pellets, the little tiny ones. And
Yep.
I've trained mandarins especially to eat pellets that way. And so being able to feed out, especially if you need to dose medications, there's some medications for seahorses especially that you have to feed it to them. And
Mhm.
so being able to have that available, especially if your seahorse is taking frozen, that's a really nice option to have. Because I know back in the day that wasn't a thing.
Mhm.
So
Right.
I'm glad it's out there. And you absolutely can use frozen. I mean, feed your pets. I live out in the middle of nowhere, like I said. You've got what
Right.
you got at your fish store, unless you want to order it and wait 4 or 5 days. Like, one of my seahorses had babies right whenever I was coming back from Aquaticon. I had to stop at the pet store and I was like, "Do you have Tigriopus that I can put in this bag right now?" And he's like, "No, but I got Cyclopes." And I was like, "I better nothing," like, put it in there.
Something
So
to
I
eat.
think somebody asked too, what my pipefish were eating. The
Yeah.
exact same as the dwarf seahorses. I don't know if you're supposed to do that, but I got them for free from a guy that I was ordering the wild caught. I think he just genuinely couldn't sell them. And I was like, okay, we'll try this one. And the Gulf ones have been doing great, and they get the exact same treatment. I just
Are,
go, each tank has their own pipette and their own little feeding thing, and I'll take out what I'm going to feed and enrich in everybody's little cup. That way it's all separate. and then I just feed everybody down the line. So spraying in between, of course. But
Well, and you're solving so many problems by feeding them individually because you don't have the cleanup. You're not worried about any excess organics. I mean, you're doing it right. Just most of us can't do that and won't do that. I mean, we're
and I
lazy.
know he too. I
But
think Ray just posted, sorry, can't get with enrichment because the wash off degrades the water quality. My macros love all of that. So I
Yeah,
right,
they're
heavily
taking it
planted
up.
macros. So I'm not worried about, I know somebody asked me about my phyto. They're like, are you worried about excess F2? And I'm like, nah, that's algae food. I got algae in the tank.
Yeah, that's the
so
difference.
Yeah.
But if for
so
somebody that
I do
doesn't have that, it could be an issue.
It could be the end of the
right.
world. Yeah.
We need to
So,
definitely make that point. You know, if you're in my tank where it's completely almost
yes.
sterile, and I
Mhm.
don't have the macros, I don't have the
Mhm.
phyto, I'm running a really super clean tank,
Yep.
that would be disastrous, right? So absolutely right. Just depends on what you're doing with your tank. I
And I
miss
think
my
that kind
macro
of
tank
goes
though.
back to whenever we were talking about the aquatic expo, I had the little picos, and they're heavily planted macro picos. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, seahorses are hard. I'm like, well, not if you, if you
You
have it
the
like
whole
Right.
this.
ecosystem in a bottle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And I've said that all along is it depends on what I'm trying to do. You know, I
Mhm.
missed my
Yeah.
first tank that was a macro tank,
Mhm.
and my seahorses bred in it. I mean,
Yeah.
they were happy. You know, everything was great. I ended up having to add a sump because I couldn't handle the nutrients
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
organics, you know. But and I'm lazy. I'm not doing my water changes
It
probably like
happens.
I should. But I'm very interested. I would love for someone like you to do more experimenting with seahorses to see how maybe a sterile tank, because most of the
Yeah.
breeders that provide captive bred seahorses are providing sterile bred
Yes.
seahorses. You throw them in a macro tank. If you don't have captive bred macros, if you don't have everything from someone like you, you're going to have a disaster
Yes.
or not. I mean, it's so random. I don't know.
And a lot of it too is like I'm able to do harvesting. I can keep a planted macro because I just take my little siphon and I have a slow gauge siphon and I'll just literally sit in there and pull off the little baby seahorses. Is everybody willing to do that? It takes about 6 hours. Probably not. So I think that's a lot of it is just my setup. So maybe I'm
Sure.
just lucky. That's definitely
Well,
something.
and dwarves too. Another thing that occurs, dwarves have a much shorter lifespan than erectus.
Sure.
Mhm.
So part of it may be that it never gets to a point where the dissolved organics affect them because they don't live long enough for it to.
Well, a lot of
And
it is mine too.
You,
I
you
send off
know, you
ICPs
only have
every
a 2 year lifespan, right?
Mhm.
Roughly.
Mhm.
yeah,
Because
but
if
you
you
know what?
think about it, in our tanks with erectus, that's about the point when you start seeing the
Problems.
bacterial
Yeah.
infections and problems from poor water quality. If they didn't live to that point anyway, you might not see it because they didn't have a long enough lifespan for it to affect them.
And I don't think
True.
too my level of monitoring. I send off ICPs every 2 weeks. I do a
Yeah.
microbial analysis every 6 weeks. I'm
Mhm.
watching for problems like this. So whenever
Well,
they
Yeah.
come up, I'm immediately fixing it.
and
So
Tia, we're not questioning
yeah.
you.
Oh
We're
no,
talking about
we're just discussing. Yeah.
and I'm saying the average hobbyist. But
Yes.
the thing I would say to Holly is, but
Mhm.
in my original macro tank, I kept those seahorses in that tank for
Mhm.
3 years. They
For
were
years.
rectus, not
Mhm.
dwarfs. It was macros, no
Mhm.
sump. I mean, and they just did well. The macros
Because they
made it
take
work.
up that
Yep.
organics,
And I
probably.
was harvesting it correctly. You know, I mean, there's all
Mhm.
these factors that matter. But I just have always wondered if maybe the natural macro bio
So
environment
they're
is maybe
probably making a difference then in reducing your dissolved organics.
and
Mhm.
possibly adding something. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like
Yeah.
if they, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but it's interesting, and
Yeah.
we want you to keep doing studies, Tia. We want you to
Definitely.
teach us, and we want to know. And Ray said, experienced keepers know that it is bad for seahorse tanks Do you mean the organics, Ray? Is that what you were saying? I'm trying to follow, guys. Sorry.
He was
Yeah.
talking about enrichment, like enriching frozen foods, and
Oh, gotcha.
how it adds to the dissolved organics in the water, and it creates problems. He was is what he was talking about.
And he said we need to be proactive rather than reactive. And I
Mhm.
110% agree. But the more that I work with seahorse keepers, newcomers, the more
Mhm.
that I realize most people don't want fry,
Yep.
right? So they don't want this sterile tank that I've got set up
Mhm.
now because I'm trying to get fry. They want a pretty tank with
Mhm.
other stuff. So we've got to
Mhm.
figure out how to help them too. We can't tell someone that wants a beautiful macro filled or coral filled or whatever tank. We can say you can't have stinging coral, you can't have fast moving fish, you can't have
Mhm.
this, that, and the other, but we can't say you've got to do it this sterile, crazy way like
Mhm.
I'm doing it because I want fry. Whereas my
Mhm.
first tank was gorgeous, had macros, had, live
Mhm.
rock, everything, all that stuff, and it did fine for multiple years, and I got my best fry from it. So I'm just I wish you were here, Ray, because I'd love to debate it with you because it's
Yeah.
just, it's where we're at. And I never want to give bad advice or lead
Yeah.
anyone astray. But the
Mhm.
thing is, with Tia, she's like super, she's doing things right. We can
Mhm.
trust her. But for the average hobbyist, we're not doing single strains of biophyto, or we're not doing single strains of phyto. We're not doing copepods in our house. We're having to trust whoever we're buying them from. So doing an ecosystem is complex, but that's why we need you to ship, Tia. We need you to ship. Dang it, because we need to buy from you so that we know it's clean and clear. Because, like you said, sometimes you buy it and you don't know what's in it. You don't know if it's produced
Mhm.
correctly. I admire and am envious of people that live around you. I can say
Oh,
that
thank
for
you.
sure.
A lot of
But
it too is like I am very privileged to be able to have Oak Ridge down the road. I can run a mass spec on my water if something looks funny or how I don't like it.
Mhm.
Um, but whenever we are talking about, it's funny because I had this conversation not even 2 days ago. This guy had a fish only tank, and he said, "Oh, I can't have all these other things in here. I can't do a refugium. It has to be UV sterilizer. I have to have an oversized skimmer. I have to do ozone." I was like, "How do you think these fish live in the ocean? They don't have any of
right, right.
and so it's funny you're talking about, oh, I have to have a sterile tank for these fry. And it's like, how do you think? Like, so
Yeah.
a lot of it is you're mimicking a lot of these natural processes and kind of how we were talking about the way the hobby's going. Bare bottom is huge in the hobby now, and it makes my skin crawl because I do 7 inches of sand. We're
Mhm.
talking anaerobic bacteria. We're talking miracle mud. I'm using different substrates than somebody who's got an inch of, carob seas live sand.
Mhm.
So my level of bio that's able to do dissolved organics, my level of bio that I'm able to do in a setting that's a little bit different than the average hobbyist, that's one of those things I have to keep in mind. It shows whenever
Mhm.
somebody's like, "Oh, I've got nitrate problems and my vanadium's high."
Mhm.
I go, "Oh, well, according to the ICP analysis I've been running for about 6 weeks now,
Mhm.
Hypnea seems to absorb a lot of vanadium and it does absorb nitrates. So let's try, let's get you in some color, but keep a light on it 24/7. Don't do anything stupid and try a blue Hypnea and see how it does for you." I have to keep in mind all these parameters when I'm recommending people things. I can't be keeping in mind, my weird seahorse tank I got lucky with. So,
Mhm.
Well, I would say I think what you're doing is awesome, and I think that that is the future. If you can figure out, oh, Hypnea does this, and that can solve that, and this macro can do this, because I always knew they were good and they helped, but I
Mhm.
never knew what they helped with and why. They
and
just
no one
helped.
has. No one studied
But
that.
but the thing is, I do want to say again for any new seahorse keepers, right? I just have to keep going back and falling back on the truth because people have been doing this for 20
Mhm.
years, 30 years. And if you want to keep seahorses, you have multiple options. You can do it the sterile way, you can do it the macro way, but there is more risk when you're depending on a
Mhm.
bio
There is.
culture because we can't do things the way you're doing them. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you have to get it right. It's
You have
hard
to
to
get
get
it
it
right.
right. If you don't get it right, then you're going to have problems.
Exactly.
If you
I've
have
always,
the
I've said
ability
to,
to get it right and you can, that's great. But if you don't, it's easier to do a more sterile.
sterile, right? I've said to Dan, I've told Dan and Alyssa both. I've been like, you're selling these seahorses that are bred in such sterile environments. If I stick them in a tank that
Mhm.
I'm doing something cool with macros and everything else, aren't they going to be exposed to this stuff? It's just a, weigh your options kind of thing.
It
But go
is.
ahead, Tia. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't even know what I was saying, dog. I just
Oh,
jumped
okay. Sorry.
in.
but yeah, no, we need you to keep doing your experiments. And someone said support her at the shows, and that will keep her going. Absolutely. That was Tim for sure. How do we support you at the shows, Tia?
Honestly, getting invited places just because I'm weird about reaching out. It's so weird to show up with something so niche and so like different. And then if everybody, has the glowfish corals and the boxes with the blue lights, and I'm here with my little jars. It's super weird. So I like being invited places. If you've got a show going on that you think would be big enough or people would be interested enough in what I've got, definitely let us know. I think we're running a referral right now. If I show up at the show where you recommended me, you get $50 worth of macro. So
Hey.
like a perk for letting me know about it and like making sure it's cool I show up. But yeah. And a
So
lot
how
of what
far
I
do
do,
you travel though? Like how far do
so
you go for
I've been on
shows
the
so
kind of
far?
show circuit. I believe I'll be in Texas for Reefapalooza. I believe,
Ooh.
fingers crossed. So that's a lot of what's going on right now is I work 3 jobs to keep this thing going. I
Oh
pay for
wow.
every test out of pocket. The only reason I have the Oak Ridge lab is because I'm working with them on a contract. So I literally work all day, every day. When I go for a show, I have to ask for PTO, and I'm not out of PTO. So
Right.
I'm interviewing for another job so that I can go to Reefapalooza, New York.
Oh,
Like
geez.
that's how dedicated to everything I am. So Reefapalooza, New York is hopefully happening if I quit my job, which is a very heavy price tag.
Right.
But hopefully I'll be going there with maybe my new distributor, so hopefully he can ship. Then Texas, I think there's going to be a North Carolina show that actually Andrea was telling me about. I think I'll be there. I think it's more of a swap than a show, but as long as people want macros, I'll show up.
That's right.
I did just recently get a small, and by small I mean 3 foot by 4 foot space in a local fish store. So people will be
Ooh.
able to pick up orders there. So if you want to order it from me, I can leave it there and you can pick it up. It'll have your name on it in cute little packaging. And I will have a couple of my little nano tanks that have been up for about 3 years now for sale. I've got too many anyway. So I'll have a couple of those little biotopes. They've got a pump and they've got a little hang on light with macros in there for sale. And then I'll be making more of those to kind of rotate in. And I do use that planted Wallstad method on all of them. So that's a little different too. So if you are interested in the tanks, like I've been talking about with the deep sand beds and the bacteria dosed and the fish food kombucha, I do have some of those available that I'll be providing. But yeah, that's basically how you can get a hold of me. Invite me to shows, and now I have a very small shop.
Hey,
Very
yeah.
small.
I don't even have any shows anywhere near me that I've figured out, but I'm in Northern California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like in rural area, so I don't even see shows, I don't think, in Sacramento ever.
Dang. Yeah, I wish there was more of us.
Weird, because you would think West Coast. I think Southern California probably has a lot of stuff like that going on because there's San Diego and all that.
Yeah.
But that's a good like 12 hours from me. So
And
I don't
also,
even,
there's a lot of laws with macroalgae in California, Canada, and Florida.
oh
Those are
yeah.
like places I'm like, oh, maybe not. So
Yeah,
that's why
no,
I
we
declined
do.
the Reefapaloozas there. I was like, man, it's not worth
Right.
crossing lines and
California's.
getting
Yeah.
pulled
Yeah,
over.
Uh-huh.
You
yeah.
know,
How many species do you currently have?
up for market 39. So I do have about 78 cooking. I have approximately 140 that are still going through the process. So there's 308 that will work in a reef tank. I'm not going to try to get them all, but I'm going to get close.
I'm telling you, oh, please, Mr. Distributor, whoever you are, please start helping her, because and they're so hard to
Kelly
find
needs
now.
another macro tank.
I
Sounds
do.
like.
I do. And I'm serious. Like, I've been doing testing because my seahorses won't give me fry right now. And I'm like, I wonder if I added macros, set it up more natural. I just want to test things and see what happens, because I'll know what if something goes wrong and I have to fix it. It's fine.
Mhm.
But I would love to buy aquacultured macros that have been,
Clean.
oh man. And they're so hard to find anymore. You can't, like, I show posts of pictures of my old macro tank, and people are, where did you get that? Where can I get that? And I'm like, I don't know anymore. It was years ago, so.
Yeah. And Tiggerboy is on Instagram. He's got little micro planted refugiums. His channel is so cool. I met him at the last Macna, and I was at Julian Sprung's little booth he had set up with some macros in the center of his mangroves. I was like, another macro person. And he's like, another macro person. And so he actually gave a talk on all of those little refugiums and coming back and everything.
Nice.
Yeah, that was really cool. He's got an awesome Instagram. If you want to look at what a really cool planted macro tank looks like. Yep. He's got a video he just did a couple days ago where it's like a possum wrasse like swimming through his refugium. Is so cool. I wish I could do photography, but like people that I see do, it's amazing. He has really cool stuff.
What's his Instagram name?
Let me find it. I follow him. It's Tiggerboy H2O, I think.
I'm probably there, but let's see.
Here, 1 second. I'll put a link in the chat. It's macroalgae scaper TIGAHBOY.H2O. I'll put the link in the chat here if I can.
Hang on, because I'm not doing well with doing both those at once. If you put the link, I'm gonna look it up. I'll put it in the comment section when we're done, guys, for sure, so you can see it too. But I'm gonna go look myself.
Yeah.
Because that's cool.
Well, I'm exiting off the YouTube because I was double hearing me. Okay, but yes. And I do have, somebody's talking about red bubble chain. Yep. Either you mean the true string of pearls or what you mean red grape caulerpa. There's another species.
I love that you just said that, because people don't understand the difference.
There's all kinds
of pearl.
Yeah.
I know, but I definitely don't know the scientific names. But the pearl, people would try to sell pearl and it would be the red grape, and it's like, that's not the same.
Yeah.
No.
But I have 3 of them. There is one species that I don't think has been in the hobby. It looks very similar to grape caulerpa, but what it has instead of those, you'll get like a string with a bunch of bubbles all together like a grape. This one has like little teardrops, and it comes out in little
teacup.
But it's like this. And
does it look like
it? Look it up.
Does it look like a teacup?
Not quite. It almost looks like a fern. It's like a fern almost going up the stems, but they're bubbles. It's weird looking. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I want to see it. I'm interested.
It's really neat. But yes. Whatever you mean by red bubble chain, if you have a picture of it, if you send it to me.
And let's get your
I'll probably if I have it, to be honest. I have a lot.
Let's get the link to your Facebook page, because until you get the website up, you're mainly on Facebook, right?
I do, and that's a good way to grow, I feel like, to my actual connection with people. You can message me directly, or my fiance, he's the CEO.
Nice.
You can actually like talk to me, and the lists that I give out to people are a little bit different depending on where you are as well. So it's a much easier way to, not gatekeep, but like make sure people are following laws and things like that. So yeah, it's easier that way. Yeah.
Yep. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read I see Zen Ginger asking about Tiger Boy's macroalgae projects. Right. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to keep up. Not very good at it while I'm trying to do this live.
Oh, hi, Grace. You.
I know. I saw Grace is here. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We've been talking good about you, Grace. We love you.
Yes.
So totally left field, but I did want to ask. I saw a post that you did saying something about using damsels and mice as shrimp to culture cotton candy macro. I gotta know, I gotta
Okay,
know.
so Reef Builders actually did an article about this, and I had looked at it
Okay.
for a couple of weeks. So I culture a couple of weird algae that are actually nuisance algae. One of them is the green slime macro. People think it's cyano all the time, but it's actually a macro.
I know what you're talking about.
That one, I culture also green turf, which people hate, but I love for its nutritional content. And then I do cotton candy. So certain species of damselfish will actually, kind of like how ants farm aphids, they will take care of mysids by allowing certain algae to grow in certain areas because they contain all of these different vitamins and trace elements. So whenever they culture the mysids in this little algae patch, they'll actually encourage it to grow. So what I've been trying to do is A, document that behavior happening in, an aquaculture setting, and B, try to get this stupid cotton candy to do well, because I know people have problems with it. I dropped the temp, which was my first problem. But yes, I finally got them culturing it. My mysids aren't doing too hot, but hopefully they'll fix that. So
Right. It'll
it'll keep them going. Yeah.
Yep.
And so those damsels, they were originally wild caught. I was real upset about it because somebody told me they had gone through quarantine and blah, 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 and I put them in quarantine and they get velvet. And I'm like, yeah. And so good thing it was in quarantine. They stayed in quarantine for the full 9 months because I'm insane and I did not want to even risk it. I used hydrogen peroxide. I used the little, oh my gosh, it's something new, the Polyp Lab Medic. I used that. I also used copper. I hit it with like literally every medication out there because I was like, hell no. And so after 9 months, they were then put into the cotton candy farm and they have since had no issues. So, you never really know. It's always like a management situation at that point. Even if you've tested and it says there's no ick, I've done the test. I don't care. Permanently contaminated. So they have a different section and that's where that experiment is. So I'm really happy about that. And I think it'll be really cool to do the results when I have results. But right now, they just now started to keep the mysid population stable. So that's nice.
Awesome. And I just want to say overall, I'm so grateful for people like you that are doing these experiments and like not only do you have the knowledge to do them, but you're actually doing them. Because I mean, like, I'm so lazy. There's no way I'd ever do everything you're doing. I mean, you're doing the work so that we can benefit. I mean, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you is just seriously all I have to say. And I think that everything you're doing is going to make a difference. And I mean, captive bred dwarfs and aquacultured macros. We got to get you shipping is all I got to say. I got to keep saying it because we got to get you shipping. I need what you have. Dang it.
Yes. And I do have 2 people who have offered to be distributors, but it's just like, man, if it comes back and somebody put freaking color artham, I think I actually have that one. Hang on, let me check the spreadsheet. Oh, I should drop that. I have like a Google Doc of everything I have to offer.
Oh man, yeah, please. And I'll make sure to share it in the description.
That's all my algae barn articles. Ignore that. Hang on.
And that's awesome that you do articles there. And I mean, it is scary for you, I'm sure, because of all the laws and because people are careless. And, I keep calling myself lazy, but I would never like flush macro or throw it in the ocean. But people do. I mean, they do.
They do.
And it's terrible. So
let me pull up the YouTube link. I think I still have it copy paste. Nope, that's the document. Hang on. Let me go over here and open it. Okay. And
everything we're talking about, guys, when she sends it to me, I'll make sure it's in the description. So anybody who watches this later, we have a lot of people watch later because, whatever. But if you watch this later, it will be in the description. I'll make sure.
I think that link worked. Let me know. I've shared it with a couple people. If it asks for like email access, just request it. I'll approve you. It's just to make sure people are getting it in the right thing. Oh, it's color coded kind of now. So also that's really cool. If you ever do buy from me, this is super essential to know. I rank my macroalgae in order of which kind of tank would best suit them. So what I have is like S tier is like you've got halides. This tank is established. You're using high quality, high alkalinity salt, iron supplements. You're using calcium carbonate sand, phyto. Juilliard's F2 dosing is happening somehow if you're dosing phyto and it contains it. That's like S tier expert. We're talking the crazy hard macroalgae.
Yep.
And we go all the way down to E, which is like, cotton candy algae. You really don't need a pump. You don't need anything but warm salt water. You can do a vase, you can do a pico tank with it. You don't even have to feed it really, just kind of put it in a warm window. So we have the whole range of not skill level, but actually the
What they
level
need.
of effort you want to put in, which
Yeah.
I think is totally different because somebody who works 70 hours a week doesn't need to work on growing this S tier algae. Like you just that's not what your best for you. You're just going to struggle. You're going to get disappointed. You're going to think macros are hard. So let's put you with something more like a C, where like you've got instant ocean, but you've got a well-established tank. You don't want to dose anything. You've got a pretty good light on it, and sand. You dose phyto sometimes. Let's get you something more like a C level. And so you would be the green. Anything highlighted in green you could keep. So it also helps with
Is this on your sheet that you're sending us or?
Yep.
Okay.
It's all color
Awesome.
coded. It
Okay.
explains also the herbivore guide. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, I put this species in and my tangs ate it immediately, which stinks because then you just wasted the money. So
Right.
it has like kind of what sort of livestock could go with where as well. Some things are do not pass go though.
With the rating, you said it, and I haven't seen the sheet yet, guys, so I'm just asking, just, blindly here, but so it'll tell you if in this category of macros that you've labeled in this category, if you have this lighting, it's fine. If you have this temperature, it's because temperature is a big thing with us seahorse keepers too.
Right now, I only do the range between 68 all the way up to 82. So all of my macro has been accustomed to that range.
Awesome.
That is on this list. And that's a requirement for me to sell it. I want to be able to thrive in all sorts of temperatures. So one of the ones I'm really struggling with right now is branching thicket. It likes a little bit cooler, and by a little bit, I mean 72. It seems to melt whenever it goes any higher than that. I've gotten it up to 76 comfortably, and we're kind of hovering there. I'm going to get a little bit more growth, a little bit more enrichment, and then we're going to bump the temp up. And then we're going to see what dies and what lives, and then we're going to get it comfortable, get it growing, and then we're going to bump it up and see who dies and who lives.
Well, I was going to say, with us seahorse keepers of the larger species, we like the cooler temps so that might be a macro for us. I mean, that might be a new thing for our tanks. Absolutely. So, where did you send the sheet?
In the YouTube. I can also send it to you over the
Facebook. Send it to me send it to me Facebook, because sometimes the YouTube things don't show up right away. And Andrea did ask, did you mention the products you use to dose the tank for macro growth?
I did not. So I am very big on, I do my farm in Instant Ocean from Petco. And I specifically grabbed it from Petco because it's usually about 4 months from expiring. And so I want to mimic the combi experience. What I use for my personal tank and what I use for the ones that are struggling in the quarantine is Tropic Marin, the high alkalinity one, which is, I think, the Bioactive. I can't remember. I'll have to look at the box. But I use Tropic Marin salt for getting them introduced and getting them used to it. If it goes in the farm where we're doing the temps and we're doing the everything with the hobbyist LED lighting, it is Instant Ocean. So if I'm dosing things, it is the Alpha Reef by Tropic Marin. I also use magnesium supplement for BRS. So I just order the one for their balling method stuff. And then I use the iodine from Brightwell. I use the Ferrion from Brightwell. And then I also use the Kato Grow. So I don't dose a lot. I dose it when I'm setting the tank up, and that way it has those nutrients in it and it's really enriched. But I don't dose it often. I just kind of do ICP tests. I'm like, oh, it's a little low on iron. So that's where I go off the testing.
Well, and that's really interesting to me because people, when I had my gorgeous macro tank, seahorse tank, people would ask me, well, what do you dose? How do you keep your iron up? And I wasn't doing anything. I mean, I literally just had light and seahorse poop. Seahorse poop did it all. I mean, that was it. So, but I understand that growing macros as extensively as you're doing, and so completely as you're doing, that takes understanding the supplements. So that's really good. Sorry, trying to.
Yeah, you're fine. And also, I'm a weirdo. Like, people send me their ICP tests, and I read them for fun. Like, the level to understand an ICP test and understand what's going on without seeing the tank and then telling you what's wrong with it is only a chemistry skill. Like, I don't understand how people are expected to read their own ICP tests. That's not fair. Like, it's hard. So Yeah, it's rough stuff. So a lot of it is that monitoring and just trying to figure out what the macro needs to thrive. And it's a guessing game too. And sometimes I kill a lot of stuff. Grace always makes fun of me and she's like, science can't go on without heaps of dead monkeys. I have
Right,
heaps
right.
of dead monkeys.
But I mean, you're doing a great thing, and you're figuring it out for all of us. So we definitely appreciate it. Sorry, trying to do 5 things at once,
You're
guys. So much life. And I mean, I hope you expand. Do you have any plans to expand? I know you have the Erectus,
Mhm.
you had the males, you figured that out. Are you
Yeah.
planning to expand more into seahorses, or?
Honestly, it's going to depend on how the macros go. A lot of
Yeah.
it is just funding. All of it is in my garage right now, and it is all fully funded off of my fiance being generous and what we get at shows and my 3 jobs. So, getting more tanks, especially as we build this new facility, I'm going to wait until the facility is up and the house is restored on the property and we get the shed going, we get the greenhouse going before I take on any new lines, just because I don't want to overwhelm myself. Once that gets set up, I'm gonna be doing everything I can get my hands on.
Of course. I can
But
I can tell you're a go-getter. You're gonna like solve all these problems for us. We love it for sure. But I mean, everything you've done so far is amazing. So impressive.
thank
Holly,
you.
what questions do you have for her?
I didn't really, because I've never done macroalgae,
Yeah.
especially. I was thinking about what you were talking about with the lighting, though, having the right lighting for like when you're hatching, like brine shrimp and things you were saying, and Fido. So I use, when I am running hatcheries, I use the chicken brood lamps. That's a type of
Yeah,
halide, isn't it?
awesome. Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's probably a good one for that kind of
Yes.
application. Okay.
Lizard
Cool.
lights. Big fan of lizard lights,
Yeah.
especially where I
Okay.
do one of my part-time jobs is a dog trainer at Petco. And so
Oh,
I work
nice.
1 day a week, and whenever I go in, that sweet, sweet employee discount. Then whenever
Uh-huh.
somebody returns a lizard light,
Yeah.
what they'll
Yeah.
usually do is they take their old one and they put it in the new box. It's like, we know what you're up to. And so
That's
they
so
can't be put
Yeah.
funny.
on the floor.
Oh
And so
God.
my manager is like, $5 for like Reptisun 5.0. So yeah. It's so like, I buy for like 90% clearance. So
Mhm.
I love the lizard lights. That's what most of them are on. It's just like those little cage lights with Reptisun 5.0s. Because
Yeah.
that's what I
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
my hands on. Halides are expensive. For
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the halometas have to have halides. I'm sorry. Like
Mhm.
they do way better with halide. Same with a lot of the big reds, as I call them. I don't know how people are keeping Dragon's Breath so happy in these tanks with Radions and Kessels, because my Dragon's Breath really only likes halides. I don't know if it's the strain I got or what, but I don't know. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but they like
So
my
no,
halide.
no, 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 no. I just have to ask you because in the tank that everybody is like, oh my gosh, how did you keep all these macros? Because I
Mhm,
had Media, I had Dragon's Breath, I had
mhm.
the blues, the reds, the greens, I had everything, the browns, everything in that tank, and all I had was a freshwater plant light.
That'll
Did
do.
that
It's a
just
red par. Yeah,
red
it's
par?
awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wondered if that was maybe the key. But
Mhm,
I tried it in my 65-gallon, and all it did was cause nuisance algae
mhm.
everywhere because it
Yep.
was too deep. So the more that you experiment and the more you test and the more you figure out, the better
Yeah.
we are because we can,
Mhm.
copy what you're doing or buy from you and just
Well,
not
actually,
have to do it.
I've just loved learning everything. Most of my
Mhm.
lighting experience actually came from a freshwater guy with his planted tank. Like, I love meeting
Yep.
people. There are far more people that know way more than me. I just like picking up little pieces and integrating into what I got. So
Mhm.
the more people I meet, the better I seem to do because I'll just steal the piece I like, you know. So
Right.
Yeah.
I love
No, I
meeting
love
everyone.
talking to
Yeah.
you because when people ask me things, I'm like, well, I can tell you what I did, but I haven't done the ICP, I haven't done all these tests and I don't know for sure this is just what worked for me,
Yeah.
But you're gathering information from different people, making sure that you know what you're talking about. I love it.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for having me.
yep. No, I love it. And so, but when you do sell the macros to people, they're already transferred into a situation where you don't have to have any crazy lighting. you've tamed it down to where any lighting works.
Yes, and Grace Romano actually taught me a lot of that. There was when I was helping her out, I was cleaning out Liverock. I'm like, toss it, it's got a hydroid, toss it. like,
Right.
no, there's a nubbin right here on this dead coral. I need it.
Yep.
I'm like, why? It's dead. It's probably got diseases. It's not sterile. She's like, no, that one little piece is more valuable to me because it lived through whatever killed it. And I was like, oh, so she taught me a lot, just with that lesson. And so whenever I do have an algae that's like horrible disaster, entire 20-gallon dead, and there's one little sprig, I'm like, hey, Grace time.
Grace time. I love it. And we love Grace.
And it lives, and it will live through whatever killed it last time. And
yep.
Here we are.
Yep. I love it. All right, guys. What else do we have to finish up with? I think that we covered pretty much everything. I mean, Tia, I want to say, not only are you, do we absolutely appreciate you coming and talking, and I'm sorry I've been so tired tonight, but we invite you back any week that you're able, because I know that you and Ray and Cheryl and Dan would have this amazing conversation talking about all this, because they've done experiments on different stuff. You've done all this testing on different stuff. It'd be a great conversation. So we invite you back every week, and I think we've covered it. Is there anything that I missed that you want to talk about?
No, I really wanted to learn from you guys. I mean, I'm fairly new to seahorses. I've had mine for about 8 months, and I mean, they've had babies and a ton, but I think I've been fairly lucky just with how much testing I've been able to learn. But I want to learn from y'all. Y'all have been doing it way longer than me. Maybe I could take some stuff I like and put it in mine. So.
That's right. Exactly. I mean, the way we're doing it might not work for you, but you could take what what's worked. And yes, absolutely. I did want to mention Andrea has all of your many of your macros from the Aquatic Expo under AI Primes right now. And she has
that's a good light too. Like AI Primes are pretty nice. Yeah, that's a really good light. So I'm glad to hear they all lived, though, because I was so terrified that my little jars, like by the end of the show, like I was getting some discoloration in the water. I was like,
oh yeah, yeah. Shows are stressful. So I mean, I'm impressed that you really enjoy them and do so well at them, because they can be super stressful. Yes. Tim wanted to know: is there a way to donate? To you?
I have Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. I take anything, so I can absolutely do that. I think I actually have it for my little show, like a little scanner thing. I could probably take a picture and like get it to you somehow.
Send it to me, guys. I'll make sure all this is in the comment section and in the comments on Facebook, so that anybody who would like to can. That sounds great.
And if anyone knows anyone hiring a marine biologist that does remote.
There you go, remote. Oh, and distributors, please, please, we need her products. Ship, please, we need them. But anyways, Holly, anything else from you? Guys, I am gonna have to call it. It's 10 o'clock.
Nothing I can think of. Yeah, it's been great though, Tia. Thank you. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
And I would say
very interesting.
As I said, Tia, you're welcome back every week, any week. And I'm sure I'll have many more questions that I'll message you on the side. Just got to be at work at 5 a.m. So, you know how it is. But we appreciate you coming and telling us all about what you're doing and sharing all of your experiences, because we have learned a lot for sure. And we hope you come back.
Oh, thank you. I will be back for sure. Yeah.
All right. Look for the links that I'm talking about in the comment section to donate, to check her out, to check out all what she's doing. And we will see you guys next week. Everybody, let's say Happy Wine Wednesday. Thank you again, Tia.
Thank you for having me. That was so fun.